everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to get into some CSS. We already created this basic HTML file that you see in front of you. It's just got some basic H1 to H6 tags. We've got a P tag, an A tag, and an image tag. We've got some comments going on here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to clean this up a bit, and then we can get started with CSS. With our recent changes, let's see what we have now. All right, cool. So it says beaches, traveling. I might make this just say beaches, whatever makes sense. And then here's our blurb here, and it has our book now link. And of course, this is just going to link us to Google for right now. But we'll change it later, and we'll make it make more sense. And then we have our beautiful image of a beach right below it. So, like I said, let's get into some CSS. So with CSS, there's inline CSS, there's internal CSS, and there's external CSS. I'm going to skip right over to the external CSS because it makes the most sense to use in every website. You're normally going to have a lot of CSS that you need, and it's just good practice to make it into its own file instead of putting it inside the HTML in any kind of way, internally or inline. If you want to learn more about those, you could definitely search up on how to do that, but right now we're just going to stick with external just because it makes more sense to use. So right after our title tag, we're going to make a link for our external CSS. Now, if you remember back a couple of videos ago, I talked about the head tag, and inside the head is what's going to load, the things that are going to load before we get to the actual page. So we have to tell it to load our CSS tag or our CSS sheet before we get to the actual page. So in order to do that, we're just going to do a link tag. So that is a left angle bracket link. And then inside link, if your editor is anything like mine, it'll kind of give you some options. Let's go with REL. REL is relationship. So that is the relationship from our the link that we're going to have in here and the file that we're in. So we're in HTML. So what is the relationship that this file is going to have with our HTML? This is our style sheet. So we're just going to simply type in style sheet inside quotes. Okay, and then we also have type equals, and then also quotes. We're going to put text/CSS. This is going to tell us that the language that we're going to be using in our external file is going to be CSS. So the next thing we need is Href, and Href is a link. So if you remember back down here, we talked about Href as well. It's the same thing. It's a link. So it's going to be our link. Now, for right now, we don't have one. So let me save this. Let's leave it empty and close our link tag. So, well, I say close. It's self-closing. So what we're going to do is just do a right angle bracket to end that. Kind of end our sentence here. All right, so let's go ahead and make a new folder. Let's call it CSS. And inside our CSS, let's make a new file called style.css. Now, the reason I do this is because it's, like I said, it's good practice. And as your files get bigger, as you code more, you're going to need this filing structure to really help you out and navigate and organize your code and where everything goes. So let's go back to demo. And now that we have an actual file, we can link it. In order to link it, right now we're in this file, demo.html. We want to get to style.css. So in order to get there, we're going to have to go into the CSS folder, and then find that file style.css. So let's go CSS and then style.css. Okay. Now it's important to note that CSS is an entirely different language than HTML. They complement one another, and they work together, but they are not the same language. They're two different languages. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's start with our H1 tag. Let's write some CSS so we can see if this is set up properly. That's what I normally like to do. I like to test my CSS and make sure it's linking to the correct place. So let's type H1 because that's the HTML tag that we wish to modify. So what always is going to go first is the tag that you want to have the CSS style to. Okay? And then you'll want some curly braces, and then inside those curly braces, that's where you're going to put your CSS. That's where you want your CSS to be at. So if we go back here, H1 is just an H1 tag with the word beaches - traveling in it. So let's see if we could center this on our page. Okay? So let's do, and how to center things. If you want to center words, you could do text, align, and if you're anything like my editor, it kind of gives you hints. Text align, and then I want to do center. And then a semicolon. You always need this semicolon to end it. It's like ending a sentence. You want to have that semicolon there. Okay? Let us save this and view it in our browser. All right, cool. You see it moved our beaches / traveling over to the center. So it looks like it's working, and that's definitely a good thing. All right, let's go back here. Another thing that I just kind of want to do, just because it's going to brighten up our page, is let's add some color to our page. Now, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. The idea behind a cascading style sheet is that you start from the top and you flow through the bottom. So it cascades through your HTML tags. So you're styling your HTML tags normally in order. So the whole point of that is also to help with what takes preference over which tag as well. Now when we start getting to IDs and classes, that's going to change up things just a little bit, but for right now, let's do something very simple and change the background color of our entire page here. So it's white now. Let's change it. It's white by default. Let's change it. So for that, I'm just going to do body, because our body, if you remember, is this whole part here. So this is our body. This whole thing is our body, all the way down to however we want it. This is our body. So if we do body, and then we can do background color. Okay, and then we could choose the color. Now you could do this one of two ways. You could say red and then save it, and if you go here, refresh it, it'll be red in the background. So that's one way you can do it. Another way to do it is you can go to your favorite browser. I like to look up color hex codes. Hex values are hexadecimal values. So they're a mix of numbers and letters that make up a color. And so when you have those hexadecimal values, you're able to have tons of more colors than just red, blue, green, or orange, or something like that. So there's a particular one that works best for me, and I don't remember what it is. We'll just use this one. So this is, we can go to red. This is just a site that I chose, htmlcolorcodes.com. You can choose whichever one that you feel more comfortable with after you play with some of them. But what you could do is you can kind of choose the shade of color that you want over on this side. And then over here, you can kind of browse through and move this around and get kind of like a brighter color red or a lighter color red or maybe a darker shade of red as it gets towards the black down here. And it'll get lighter as it gets towards the white. And sometimes it'll turn like this gray color. So it's just an easy way to find a good color that you want. I'm not a fan of red. I don't know why I gave y'all this example. But with mine being beaches, let's do something more like a blue or a green, somewhere in between here. All right, and I'm going to make this go up a little bit because I kind of want a brighter color. So right now I'm choosing the color based on what my site is going to be, which is beaches. So I'm going to choose this lighter color here. Now, if I want to use this color, after I'm done, I see the color right here. That's the blue I want. It looks cool. I like it. For right now, let me go to hex here, and then I should be able to just copy this value. Control C if you're not sure. And then I'm going to go back to my text editor, and instead of red here, I'm just going to paste in Control V that hex value, and then I'm going to save it. I look in my browser here and refresh, and now it has this blue back here. So it's really I like this color blue. It's pretty. So you can choose, like I said, you could choose any color that you want. I'm just going to stick with this. All right. So after we have changed the background color with the body tag, we've put the H1 tag in the center. Okay, I'm not going to mess with the P tag right now. I like the way it looks. So the next thing is this A tag. Now with the links, we could start messing with the decoration of the link as well, which would be kind of cool to look at. So right now, let's refresh. Right now, it's just a regular looking link here. We can do something like, if we did A, curly brace, and we did text decoration, and we can do none. We refreshed, and now there is no text decoration. So it looks like it's just a regular word, and you wouldn't know it's a link until you hover over it. And it looks like that little hand is there for us to click on it. So yeah, that's kind of interesting to mess around with. Let's look at this image next. So I'm going to do IMG to target the image, curly brace, and then I want to change the height and width of it because it's a little big and I kind of don't want it that large. If you look at it, it's overlapping my page right now, and I don't really want it like that. So let's do height, and let's do 350 and width of 300. Okay, so what I did is just picked out a couple values, just spitballing off the top of my head right now. So the PX are pixels. All right, the pixels are going to be the dots that make up the actual image on your screen. So they're going to be what makes up all the items on your screen, basically. So pixels are basically according to your screen size. So I did pixels, which means that, you know, if you were to view this on your screen, it's going to look different if your screen isn't as big as mine. So I have kind of a wider screen. So if you have like a 12-inch MacBook Pro, it's going to look different in pixels on your screen than it would on mine. Okay, so those are pixels. And you could use pixels, you could use percentages. It's just kind of what you're comfortable with here. I like pixels for this exercise, and I think we're going to stick with pixels for this whole thing until we kind of, we could explore some of the different options. But I think I'm going to stick with pixels here for this whole project. If you aren't comfortable with pixels, then I suggest you read more about it, become more comfortable with it. But yeah, they're just dots on the screen that makes up a specific object that's on the screen. So relatively straightforward here. I know that can be kind of confusing. You're like, wait, what's pixels? I don't know. But that's basically what it is. What I changed for the image tag is the height and width. Okay? So let's go here and let's see what that looks like. Ooh, okay. So, lesson learned here. So what we have is a very shrunken image here. It doesn't look very cool. Now, if you remember, my image used to be very wide. It used to spread across this whole screen here. So from here to here. So it's a very long image. So I'm shrinking it significantly, and it looks very shrunken. So while we're here, there's something that I'd like to tell you about to kind of help you whenever you're using style or mainly styling, to be able to help you so we're not going back and forth and changing numbers. So there's a thing called inspect element. So on the page that you're on, if you right click, you should see something that says inspect. And then if you click on it, it may open up on this side. It may open up at the bottom. This one in particular is on this side. So I just moved it over a little bit. You could dock it any other way that you want. If you go here, dock side, you could dock to the bottom. You can dock it in a separate window. You can take it back to the side. I'm going to keep mine to the side for right now. So what you want to do while you're here is it's a good way to look at your styling. So let's look at this. So it has our HTML. It's got our body. It's got my H1. And if you look, as you hover over it, it highlights it on this side, which is kind of cool. So you see exactly what you're doing. So there's that P tag. It's highlighted here. The A tag is highlighted as well. And we get to the image, and we see the image in its dimensions. So if you want to select it, we can click on that. And then if we look at the bottom here where it says styles, it has image, and it has that height of 350 pixels and width of 300 pixels. That's what we just did, right? So this is a good way to kind of see, this is a good way to fix things whenever you're kind of messing around with websites and things. So I know my original width of this was much bigger. So let's change the width and see if we can't get it looking halfway decent. Okay, so I'm guessing it was about 1200 pixels in width beforehand, before I changed it to 300. So let's change it to something like 800. And that looks a little better. It definitely looks much better than it was, and it spread it out a bit, so it looks relatively cooler, right? So I have this where I need it. You may have to mess around with the image that you got, but I like what I have here. Another thing about having this open and using it consistently is that you can kind of, these are checked, which means they are on the page. If you uncheck it, it means it's not using it anymore. So if I don't have a width, it's just going to automatically put it to this width. Okay? And then if I don't have a height, it's just going to be the height that it was before. But I kind of like it like this. If I wanted to do the width, it'll kind of shrink it down a little bit more. I'm kind of debating. I like it like this, but we're just going to keep it at 800 for right now. Okay? Now, the thing you should know is that if you refresh, all of it, all of what you did here disappears. So this does not save to your style.css file. It is only in your browser. So if you want to actually make these changes a reality, you have to go to the file and actually change it. Which is really cool that they give you the file name here, style.css, that's what we named it, and it gives you the line that it's on. So it's on line 10. So let's go to line 10. Right here is our image, right? And if we had a bigger file, you could imagine if we had a bigger file, that would definitely come in handy. So let me go ahead and change this to 800 and save it. And let's go back, refresh our page. And so here it is right here. Looks pretty cool. Now, something I see is that just looking at this, you know, it looks like it flows relatively cool. This looks nice. These words look cool. But we kind of have this one here and this one here, this tag here, this tag here. It kind of looks a little out of place, right? So let's use a property called display. And it gives you the same options here. Let's do a block. Okay? Block styling is going to put this particular tag or item or ID or class, whatever it may be, it's going to put this particular tag, in our case right now, into a separate line, right? So it's going to display it in blocks. So blocks normally build upon one another. They're on top of each other. They stack, right? So it has it as a block, which means it has its own line, which means this whole image is going to take up this whole block here, this whole line. So it looks kind of better on what I think. You know, I think it looks a little bit better than what it was before, because now it's literally the book now, and then it has this, which is cool. Now, another thing, there's also instead of block, there's also an inline. And inline is going to do exactly how we had it. So it's going to have it right beside this one. Okay, so this block, this image is going to be in line with the tags around it. Okay, so in this case, the A tag is the only one around it, so it's going to be in line with this one. So let's leave it as, let's leave it as block. And again, I made the change here, but I didn't save it in my file. So let me go back to my file and do display block. All right. And if I were to refresh, now it's a display block as I expected it to be. Okay. Another thing that I'm seeing just kind of right off the bat here is that there is not a lot of space in between these two tags. So you can't really see the book now. We'll kind of go back to that, but I'd like to create some space in between this image and this tag here. So there's a nifty little thing here. It's like an image, and whatever tag that you're in, it'll still have this here, so you can see. Let me go back to the image. So right now I've got an 800 by 350 image size here. So we also have padding. Padding is going to give you space to the top, right, bottom, and left of this image here. In our case, it's an image. So whatever the tag may be, it could be a P tag, could be an A tag. Whatever this is, it's going to give it some padding, which is right around it. Now, the border is going to be the outer edge of this. So it's going to be right around here. That's going to be the border. And you can create a border for, again, the top, right, left, bottom of this tag here. There's also margin, which is outside of the border. Okay, and again, that's going to give you margin to the top, right, bottom, and left of this tag here. So it's really cool that they have this here. So it's also, I like it because of the imagery of it. I like seeing images of things in action. But if you want, you could read more about that online as well. But we're going to go for the padding. Okay? So, because I want some space in between here and here. So let's do padding. Now, you could do padding, and if you wanted, you can do top. And again, I'm using pixels. You could do top. Sorry. You could do the top. Do the right. You can do the bottom. And then you can do the left. Okay, and so it's gonna show you the dimensions here, and I'm gonna show you how much padding is there. So at the top, there's a pretty hefty amount at the top. There's some at the right here. Let's do this. Right, yeah. So there's some at the right here, then there's some at the bottom and some at the left. Now, you could do it that way if you want. I only want padding for the top, so I'm not going to use all those. I'm just going to do padding dash top, and that's just going to target the top of it. So I'm going to put my 10 here. So as you can see, it gives you a nice little space right here, which is nice because I kind of want to separate the two. I don't want them to be exactly the same. So I'm going to use 10 pixels. Now, if you wanted, you could do this. Zero and then 0. You could do that as well. But I'm going to stick with my padding top. Okay. All right, so we've got it to display block. Now, since we've displayed it block, we can center this image by using auto. So we could do margin left. So that's going to do the outer margin here, which is the margin that's close to the element next to it. So we could do margin left auto. And auto is going to say, hey, it's going to automatically adjust it based on our screen. Margin right auto is going to automatically adjust that. Now, both of those, with the fact that it's a block element and it has a width measurement, it's going to make it centered based on those items. So I have now a centered image, just like I wanted. I am going to make sure I go back to Atom and make sure I put in my margin left and my margin right here. So I could do margin left auto, and I could do margin right auto as well. And let me save that. And then if I were to review it, it is in the center as I expected it to be. Now, let's go back to this A tag. This A tag is not centered. It looks a little off kilter. So I personally would like to center it over. Another thing that I just remembered, I added padding, didn't I? And I don't have any padding anymore. So let's add our padding. Let's do a little bit more. Let's do 15 this time. And refresh. And now I have my padding. I had taken it out before. It's back in. So, okay, let's look at our A tag. Right now, our A tag just has a text decoration of none. Okay? Let's give it a width. We'll do 100 pixels. And then we will display this block, which means it's going to take up this whole line. For right now, there's no elements that I need next to it. I really just want it to show this link here. So it's going to be block element for right now. It's displayed block. And then I can do the same thing. Hit margin left auto and margin right auto. So if you see, it kind of pulls it all the way to the left, and then once you put margin right auto, it pulls it back to the center, exactly where we want this at. So we've got that done. We also want to make sure that we put this into our actual text editor. So I did a width of 100 pixels, and don't forget your semicolons at the end. I displayed it block, so it's on one line. I've also did margin left auto and margin right auto to pull it towards the center. Okay, so let me refresh this. It all looks good. Let's change one more property. Okay, let's mess with the color property. So we didn't do anything to the P tag. Let's go back to the P tag. Okay, so the P tag is right after this H1. Generally, you want to keep your styles in order. Okay, so the P tag was right after the H1. And I'm just going to use the color property. And same thing. You could say green, and it'll change it to green, or you can go back to your color codes here, and let's see, probably want something a little bit darker, maybe. I'm no designer, so I'm just guessing here. Copy. Okay, since I am not a designer, let's see how this looks. I'm going to paste it into here. It looks a little, what's the word? Would I be able to see that on a regular day? Probably not. So, see if we can get it closer to the black. Let's copy this. Paste it. That looks a little darker. Okay? Another thing that we can do is change the size of this font. So before I do that, let me go back here where it says green and let me paste in that color. Then let's do font size, the property, to change it. The value for font size can be in pixels. It could be in points as well. So I'm going to just do mine in points because it's just easier. So let me do a 14-point font and I'll save it. You could do any number that you wish. I'm going to refresh mine. It looks bigger. I like what I'm seeing. It looks really cool. It's looking like it's coming together. And just do text align center. And that looks really good. So I'm going to save this change. That's kind of the beauty of kind of using all the resources that you have. So here is our file that we have, our page. Looks pretty cool. So right now, that's kind of what it looks like. So here's what our page looks like. Looks pretty cool. Everything's centered. Everything flows pretty well. It looks like a nice little kind of intro to a website. So we're getting there. We'll get there slowly but surely. But hopefully you learned something. We did a lot of CSS, messing with the background color, text align center. You could play around with these properties as well. And color, font size, text decorations for our A tags. You could also use text decoration for any tag, really the P tag as well if you wanted to, and mess with those and underline things and get into some really cool things, and height and width, and displaying block versus inline, and our margins and padding. So we did kind of a lot here. I encourage you all to just kind of mess around with these properties, explore other properties and their values, and kind of just keep coding. So like I said, I'm looking to make this into like a full website. So hopefully we can get something that's really tangible finished soon. So thank you for joining me. If you have any comments, you can list them below. If you liked it, give me a like. If you want more content like this, subscribe, and it's yours. So I'll see you next time in the next one. Bye.